It's time for us to begin this evening. I want to welcome you all to South Central College. We're so glad to be able to host this candidate forum this evening for the 1st Congressional District. As many of you know, I'm Andy Wilke with Greater Mankato Growth. Pleased to be hosting this forum and having South Central College as a partner this evening. I do want to give Dr. Parker, the president of South Central College, a moment to say a few words. So, Dr. Parker.
Thank you. Welcome to South Central College. We're honored to be able to host this forum tonight. South Central College is the community's college. I always say that. It's about our role in giving back to the community. And so it's just an honor for you to be here in our auditorium today. This auditorium is named after John Wilke, who was one of our founding presidents when we were the Mankato Area Vocational Technical Institute, which is core to who we are today. And we see ourselves serving southern Minnesota, really making sure that our students are educated, trained for the workforce, but part of our community, civically engaged and giving back in as many ways as we can involve them. So thank you. I want to thank our two candidates. Rachel, we got to know each other today, and Brad Finstead and I have known each other for quite a while, and it's an honor to know two wonderful people, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts and vision for our state. Thank you, and welcome to South Central.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parker. It's so great to hear from you and hear about all the great things that are happening at South Central College. So again, thank you and welcome. I am one of your moderators this evening, and I am joined by Maddie Paul of KEYC as co-moderator. I'd like to thank Maddie and KEYC for your partnership with this forum. I want to thank you all for attending this evening. This event is being recorded and will be available online at greatermankatoelections.com. For those who don't know, Greater Mankato Growth is the Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development organization serving the Greater Mankato region, and our membership includes more than 900 members, including private, public, and nonprofit partners. Our organization also includes Visit Mankato, the City Center Partnership, and Green Scene. Before I address some housekeeping items, I want to let you know that Greater Mankato Growth is hosting a total of 4 forums this year. Tomorrow night, we'll host our final forum that includes Minnesota House Districts 18A, 18B, and 22A. That forum is at 6 p.m. at the Mankato Intergovernmental Center. You can get more information on all past forums and future forums, along with a voter toolkit and candidate biographies at greatermankatoelections.com. For tonight, our goal is simple. We want to give voters a chance to hear from candidates directly about issues that impact the business and economic vitality of our region. But first, I'd like to set a few expectations for our audience to help us present an engaging and civil dialogue this evening. We have more questions than we have time for, so we ask that you help us make the most of our time by holding your applause until the end of the forum, and there be no shouting or heckling, especially of the moderators. In all seriousness, please hold your applause to the end of the forum. This evening's format is as follows. Each candidate will be asked a question and given 2 to 3 minutes to answer the question. This evening, we're more interested in a robust discussion and getting these candidates' thoughts on issues, so it may take longer in some instances. As a follow-up, questions and discussion will be at the discretion of the moderators. These questions have been put together by me and Maddie, along with input from the Greater Mankato Growth Advocacy Committee. They have not been shared with the candidates. And lastly, some of you have submitted questions at the entrance. Thank you. Those questions will be delivered later on, and we will ask some of those as time allows. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce the candidates for this evening, Brad Finstead and Rachel Bowman. Please join me in thanking them for being here this evening. That's enough for me. We'll get started. The first question goes to Brad Finstead, and Maddie, you kick us off.
Well, thank you, Andy, and thank you for letting me be here tonight. I'm very excited to hear from both of you. And as an opening statement, please share who you are and why you are running to represent the 1st Congressional District of Minnesota. And Mr. Finstead, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Andy and Maddie, for moderating tonight. Thank you for the Greater Mankato Growth and the Green Team KEYC for hosting this. Thank you, Dr. Parker. It's always great to see you and to celebrate your leadership as you're, almost on the way out here. But thank you so much for what you've done for our community. And Rachel, thank you. The beauty of Southern Minnesota is we have so many connections, and sometimes we don't realize it until 20-some years later, but Rachel and I actually went to college together at the University of Minnesota. We didn't realize that until a few months back at Farm Fest when she reminded me of it. But it was a great reminder of how connected we are. My name is Brad Finstead. I am from the New Ulm area. I'm a fourth-generation farmer. My wife and I, Jackie, met in second grade on the school bus, and God has blessed us with 7 amazing children. We're raising the 5th generation of farmers in Brown County. We are very honored to farm on the ground that has been in our families, and it's really important to us to continue that farming and agriculture heritage. We have 7 children. Our 2 oldest are in college, and the 5 younger ones go to New Ulm Cathedral over there in New Ulm. When I have had the honor to travel over the last 2.5 years across southern Minnesota, the thousands of miles, the hundreds of visits, the tours of businesses, schools, communities, the ride-alongs with the police departments, I have heard over and over and over again how this economy is not working for families in southern Minnesota. And I can tell you, as a dad of 7, we feel it, we see it. But one story that sticks out, just a few weeks back, I had a young mom of 3 children stop me, and we were talking, and she said, "Do you know, the other day I just bought a box of Cheez-Its, and it was $8.21 for that box of Cheez-Its." And she just had this look like, Cheez-Its, for 3 young kids, it's just a staple in our household. And when we're having trouble buying things like Cheez-Its or $4 or $5 a dozen for eggs, it's just the everyday price of this economy that's not working for us. And you think about where we are as a generation or as a country. And I think back to my Norwegian grandfather who taught me at a very young age that whatever you're going to do it well and leave it better for the next. And so I look at our generation, those of us in this country right now, and if we can honestly look ourselves in the mirror and say, is our country in a better place today than it was when we were kids? And if we can't answer that and say yes, then we all need to work together. Republicans and Democrats, rip the R and the D off the sweatshirt, put the USA back on, and figure out how to make our backyard better for our kids. And that's what drives me to run. And that is why I am continuing to seek office. It's been an honor of a lifetime to sit in your seat in Congress. I want to make that crystal clear. I firmly understand that the seat belongs to the people of the 700,000 people of southern Minnesota. It doesn't belong to me. It wouldn't belong to Rachel. It doesn't belong to a Republican. It doesn't belong to a Democrat. It belongs to the 700,000 people of southern Minnesota. It's an honor of a lifetime to represent you in Congress, and I look forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. I do want to say thank you to Brad and to thank you for being here. With 20-some days left of the election, I think we can all agree that we're getting a little bit tired of listening to any kind of political ads or political rhetoric. So I appreciate you being here, being engaged in this conversation today, and I'm hoping that we can really show the difference between myself and what Brad stands for. My name is Rachel. I'm running because I grew up in Rochester. I was the daughter of a single mother. Our family struggled with poverty and addiction. I know what it's like to face tough times. I know exactly what it feels like to get out of poverty and to deal with addiction in families. It's not easy. I worked my way through college and I worked my way through law school to create a better future for myself and for my family. I live in Rochester now with my husband and my 2 daughters. And I've had an amazing 25-year career in public service. I always wanted to give back to my community, which is why I'm here running today. I wanted to give back to those that gave to me while I was growing up. And one of the most incredibly career accomplishment that I've had is I'm an award-winning lawyer, election lawyer, that worked and accomplished. I led a bipartisan group to modernize our state's election system. That is not an easy task. And that meant me reaching across the aisle to get good work done so that every person in here had that opportunity to vote fairly. Democracy, in my mind, matters. It's important. And so I've also served in other capacities. I was Hennepin County Elections Manager. I was elected to the Rochester Township Board, and I served as an assistant county attorney, where I worked on general civil work for the county, which is a lot of budget work, and I also did child protection. And I often talk about how running for Congress is a whole lot easier than doing child protection work. So when I think about, and as I've traveled 25,000 miles on my car, I know exactly the economic issues that you're talking about. I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to lower the costs of things like healthcare, childcare, housing, to improve local access for things like long-term care, EMS services. Those are important. And let's get a farm bill done. Our farm bill will be expired. I think we need a farm bill that works for our farmers and continues to feed our kids. And I will absolutely work to restore reproductive rights for women. I want to see our main streets lined with locally owned small businesses. And I'm not sure that I've seen that work for my opponent. The Farm Bill is now expired. He's voted against critical infrastructure funding. He's voted against important budgetary decisions. He's voted lockstep with Trump. I think this district deserves a better representation, someone that is moderate, that shows the moderate, that shows the bipartisan work. And I am absolutely willing to fight for that. It would be a tremendous honor to work for the people of this district, not for special interests, but the people of this district, to have these hard conversations and face those issues that we are struggling with in our economy and our everyday lives. It would be a tremendous honor to be your representative of this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowman. We're going to stick with you too, so hang on to that microphone, and we're going to talk about the role of government. So we'd like to start with a question that perhaps gets at the core of your differing political philosophies. Please describe what you think is the proper role of the federal government in today's society, and what do you believe are the core responsibilities of Congress within that system?
Thank you. All right, so yes, this does get to a very core difference. I believe that the federal government does have a very important role to play. We are no longer in a world where we are siloed into little townships or cities. Our communities are interconnected, which means the city of Mankato, for example, is connected with so many other places because your industries are moving goods on Highway 14. We can't have a system where the federal government doesn't play its role, because what that means is that it pushes the tax burden on the state and it pushes it onto property tax owners. I'm going to give you an example. FEMA. My opponent recently voted against FEMA funding. Think about the good people of North Carolina and Florida. What would have happened if they would not have had access to those federal FEMA funds, which we also used right here in Mankato during the spring, the flooding. I think about those, if that had not been taken care of by the federal government, it would be pushed on to the state, and it would be pushed on to you as property tax owners. We see it in education, we see it in roads, and that is not the way that economic fairness works. And so the federal government, if they're not playing their role and setting the course of the budget, it will push it on to your state, your county, your city, your school district. And we are seeing it play out every single day. We are an interconnected community. Now, North Carolina, I'm going to give you an example. North Carolina has one of the most important industries that they have is that they create IV fluid so that all of the hospitals all around the United States use that supply chain. When that supply chain is interrupted, guess what happens? Hospitals are now canceling surgeries. There is no access to IV fluid. And that is exactly why we need to make sure that we are all helping each other when it comes to the federal dollar. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Finstead.
Thank you. So, yeah, you will see a difference here. First of all, I'm not going to play politics as normal, and I'm not going to tell you half-truths and half-stories. So there was not one single vote that I took to not fund FEMA alone. What I took a vote against is the spending and the omnibus packages that continue to put us in debt as a country. Continuing resolutions, automatic fund government down the road, omnibus bills that fund all sides of government with one vote, one yes, one no. That is not what you deserve as taxpayers of this country. If we were going to have a FEMA vote, let's bring the FEMA bill up for a vote, yes or no on FEMA funding. Then we can talk about where the money goes and how it's spent and how the regulatory arm of FEMA then is utilized in our communities. But instead, politics as usual, to be used in political campaigns is, well, let's all throw it in a big bucket of government funding, and then let's accuse our opponent of voting yes or no on that bill. That's what got us $36 trillion in debt. My view of government is the best form of government is the local control. Local government, our townships, our city councils, our counties, our state. It's the most connected and close to the people. The further away from the people you get, you have bureaucrats in marble towers in Washington, D.C. that are creating a regulatory arm of the government that costs us as taxpayers over and over and over again. I had the opportunity to tour a few facilities in the last couple days. I will tell you a story. Yesterday, I got to tour the Dotson Iron Foundry right in town here. And our big, heavy hand of that federal government that so many love, that big federal government, has created now modeling through the EPA regulatory arm that will dictate if the foundry can exist or not. Not actual scientific data and measurements, but modeling. So they are making assumptions, and they are in the process of closing down different foundries. That is a government that is too big and too out of control. And so I am a Reagan Republican. I believe that we have an awesome country, that we have an awesome responsibility to protect our country, to grow our economy, to grow our country. And I know the best form of government is the most local form.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Finstead. We'll start this next question with you. We just talked about two big key differences, but you both have also mentioned compromise and balance tonight. The political divide in our country continues to grow, not just along the party lines, but also when you look at urban versus rural divide. How do you view the nation's current political climate, and how would you use your role as an elected leader to shape that climate going forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the quick answer is our political climate is insane right now as a country. I say this quite often, and you, for those of you that know me, know that I've talked a lot about my Norwegian grandfather. He was important in my life. He taught me a lot of life lessons early on. One of the lessons that he taught me is that as you live life, think of a teeter-totter, and think of emotion on one side of the teeter-totter and reason on the other. And as you make big life decisions, if that teeter-totter is out of balance and you're all emotion, if you're all heart but no head, you'll maybe go into something that feels good or sounds good, or you have this emotional push towards it, but you haven't really thought it all out. Now, conversely, if you act with all reason, if you're all head but no heart, you're going to be cold and callous, and you'll have no personal relationship with the decision. And as a country right now, I think our teeter-totter's out of balance. I think we're all emotional right now. We find a million different reasons to get mad at each other. We find a million different reasons to fight each other. And our country wasn't built on that. Our country was built on the ability to be intellectual people, people that can can have conversations that maybe get to the point where we just agree to disagree on things, but that's okay. We don't have to agree 100% of the time on things. Who in your life do you agree with 100% of the time? But why do we expect it differently in our politics right now? Why do we expect it differently in our country? So I have tried to be the adult in the room in Congress. I'm in the top 25% most conservative members of Congress, but I'm also in the top 25% of the most bipartisan members of Congress. And some people will ask me, well, how can that be? Well, it's because I treat people with respect. I try to have honest conversations. I know that we won't agree on things all the time, and that's okay. This country was built on that. But this country was also built on the idea that we believed in the American dream, that we believed in our country, we believed in the fact that we should leave it better than we found it, and that we have to commit to each other to work on those things. So the climate that we are in right now is very emotional, and it's politically insane. We are always fighting. And so we have to lower the temperature as a country. We have to figure out how we can work together on things. Otherwise, this rural-urban divide, this Republican-Democrat divide, it will only get worse, and it will only tear our country down. I've often said it, it's time for us to tear the R and the D off the sweatshirt, put the USA back on, and figure out how to make good, sane, intellectual, emotional decisions that move our country forward.
Thank you. Ms. Bowman?
I heard the same message from my opponent 2 years ago, and guess what? He voted lockstep with Trump every single time. The infrastructure bill was a vote no. The recent continuing resolution was a vote no. The bipartisan immigration bill was a vote no. I could go on. And I am not okay with returning my opponent back to Congress to play the same partisan games. Like I mentioned, one of the things that I worked on and feel really proud of is the fact that I led a bipartisan group, Republicans and Democrats, to pass very important election changes. We had to work very carefully. We had to work very closely. We had a red group, which meant we're not going there. A green group, which said, that sounds great. We can do that. We need to explore that. And we had a yellow group that said, we need to work, we're not quite sure where we are. We can find common ground. And I do believe that we have to have these hard conversations. I don't believe that many of these issues are something that we can just dance around. They're tough issues, and I understand that. But until we can sit down and figure out where we are or where that sweet spot is. Now, I get what my opponent is saying. I really understand that some of these bills are, they're complex. They have a lot of components to it. But sometimes you need to see the forest through the trees to make sure that you're showing up and you're representing the people of the 1st District. One example is the infrastructure bill. There were 9 clean water projects in that bill. There were airport funding in that bill. The city of Waseca got $1.75 million in that bill. He voted no. And the problem with that, again, is that you would shift that tax burden onto the city of Waseca alone. How many taxpayers do you think are in the city of Waseca? There's only about 6,000. And that doesn't even include those that are on a fixed income. So the problem here is that when we're voting and showing up and not doing the things that we're saying we're going to do, it pushes again onto the state and onto the county. We're not helping southern Minnesota. And let's talk about the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill came out of House Committee, but that's as far as it got. It never made it to the House floor. The Farm Bill is now will be expired at the end of this year. Why didn't it make it to the House floor? We have an extremely crazy, chaotic Congress in charge right now, or a House in charge. I think we can do better. The farmers need it. The kids need it. The seniors need it. And that's what I'm willing to fight for.
Thank you, Ms. Bowman. We're doing great. You guys have answered 3 questions so far. Proud of you. Thank you. We're doing good on time. So we want to get to some more questions, so we'll tighten them up just a little bit more. So Ms. Bowman, we'll stick with you. This is a straightforward question. What will be your top 2 or 3 priorities if elected?
Well, number 1 is healthcare. Access and affordability of healthcare is a really significant issue facing our district. I hear that from all corners of our district, and it's incredible that we are in a healthcare industry in southern Minnesota, but still struggling with access and affordability. And the second part of healthcare question also refers to women's reproductive health. I will absolutely restore reproductive health on the national level, 100%. And my opponent, I know, is fully against that. The second most important thing that I believe beyond healthcare would be fixing our economy. I hear you. I hear that we're struggling. I hear that we need to find some way to make sure that we can succeed in our world. We have been told from very early on that if we do all the right things, we can feed our family, we can make sure that we've got enough food on our table. And I know that that is getting harder and harder to do. We have different approaches on how to do that, but I do believe it is a hot top priority for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Finstead.
Thank you. So first of all, Rachel, you have to fire whoever's doing your research for you because they're wildly inaccurate. First of all, in the House, we never voted on a bipartisan immigration bill. That was killed in the Senate. So to assert that I did that is completely false. Secondly, you talked about the 9 clean water provisions in the infrastructure bill. How do you think they got in the bill? I carried them, I put them in the bill. When it was passed off the floor as a separate infrastructure bill, it was great. When it was put into the big bucket of an omnibus bill, which gets us $36 trillion in debt, we tend to lose the issues. In regards to the top issues of the day that I'm hearing day in, day out, and it's the economy, number 1, through and through. It's the price of food, it's the price of gas, it's inflation. It is all of the complexities of the economy that's really just drowning us as families in southern Minnesota. We have a country that just 5 years ago was energy dominant. We were a net exporter of energy. People around the globe were buying energy from us. We had 2% interest rates. We had an economy that was booming. We had $1.80 gas. We had families' budgets that had never been as well as they were. Fast forward 5 years, $5 to $6 trillion of excess government spending, inflation on the increase. We have 7% home loans. We have $4 gas. We are now importing energy. And we are on the 3rd year of an ag trade deficit as a country. It's only happened 4 times in 50 years. We are buying more food from other countries than we are selling across the globe. This economy is not working right now. And so we have to get back to the basics. We have to become energy dominant again. We have to start bringing our prices down. We have to get people working. We have to create an economy that works for families all across this country. The second issue is, and it's really tied to public safety, is we as a country have to get serious about the border. We have a border right now that does not exist. We have a problem. And this isn't just me as your representative saying it. I just did a ride-along with the Rochester Police. I was with the police chief of Red Wing just a couple weeks ago. Our law enforcement officers are seeing this day in and day out. We have over 12 million illegals that have crossed the border. We have catch and release policies that this administration has implemented. We had 14,000 convicted murders that were caught at the border and released into our country. 40,000 sex offenders caught and released at the border. 500,000 convicted criminals caught at the border and released into our country. You don't have to believe me. That was President Joe Biden's Department of Homeland Security. Now, here's how it plays out in our communities. I'm sitting with the police officers in Red Wing, and they pull out a laptop and they start showing me of some of their recent arrests. Just a couple weeks ago, they get a call, they show up to a house, they arrest the individual that was sitting there with meth and fentanyl. They put him into the squad car and they pull out 6 driver's licenses from 6 different states with 6 different social security numbers. And that is the facts, and the Red Wing chief was proud to share that, and he said, tell everybody about it because that's what they're dealing with. And that is right here in our backyard. Now, coincidentally, we have seen overdose deaths on the rise in the city of Red Wing. And it's directly tied to the drugs and the cartel laundering that we're seeing. So we have to get serious about our border. We have to get serious about immigration in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Finstead. We'll start this next question with you. And again, let's keep these answers tight so we can get to more questions for both of you. And let's move on to agriculture because it remains to be the bedrock of communities in our district here, the 1st District. And the agriculture industry faces a growing list of challenges. Congress has not yet passed a new farm bill. So as the next Congress works to pass a farm bill, what will be your priorities to better support the growth of the agriculture community in our region?
Yeah, so thank you for this question. So obviously in my introduction, I told you farming is near and dear to me. I am a farmer. I'm one of 10 real farmers that serves in Congress. We have a lot of lawyers. We don't have a lot of farmers. And I will tell you that I'm proud of that. I'm proud to bring a real life perspective of someone that knows what driving a John Deere tractor is like, what knows, who experiences combining corn right now, seeing the market at about $4 or less, knowing that my break even is $4.50. Watching my soybeans yield monitor showing me that I'm losing money every acre I combine. And farmers are feeling the struggle right now. In regards to the Farm Bill, we have a great bipartisan Farm Bill that we passed out of the Ag Committee. I would also, Rachel, recommend that you talk to Senator Klobuchar and ask her where the Senate Democrat Farm Bill is. Because the fact of the matter is it doesn't exist. So Congress is run, obviously, by the Senate and the House, and we need 2 to tango on that. So we're looking for the Senate to do something. In the House, we have a bipartisan bill that has made it through committee. I'm very proud of the work that we've done there, the 12 different titles. It's a $1.6 trillion bill over 10 years. 1.2 of that is the nutrition title alone. We have invested in things that matter to farmers like crop insurance. We have strengthened conservation programs, making sure that they're locally led, farmer-friendly, innovative in their approach. We have taken a strong stance to invest in nutrition and invest in those that need a hand up, not just a handout. We have worked very hard in a bipartisan manner to make that happen. I had over 45 bills and pieces of legislation that I was working on that were put into the Farm Bill. 25 of them, Angie Craig and I and other Democrats co-authored together. So in a very bipartisan manner, we were able to build this Farm Bill. I feel good about our chances of it getting done after the election, but again, we need the Senate to move on it and we will see something happen. But it's of vital importance. On the same front, we cannot continue down this path of an ag trade deficit. We need to get agriculture at the table and start trade negotiations with our friends and partners around the globe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bowman?
Well, yes, I am not a farmer, but I have been extremely grateful to all the farmers who have taken me under their wing in southern Minnesota to show me the way of farming. I have been in combines, I have been enjoying life, learning about farm and ag industries. And I will say that farmers are one of my favorite people because they really understand hard work and taking care of one another. And I see it time and time again through this district. And that's something I can really relate to. I can really understand that. So when my opponent talks about going to Congress and passing this bipartisan farm bill, well, let me tell you a little bit about the contents of that farm bill. So first of all, it actually benefited southern crops more than it did northern crops. It also didn't make it through, it made it through the House committee, but then it stopped there because it actually was not bipartisan. It cut major funding to SNAP funding, which is in southern Minnesota includes 22,000 people elderly and children that would not have qualified for the benefits because of that. It is not a hand up, and I think it's offensive to talk about people that way. It is not something, if you are a recipient of food stamps, you are making almost nothing. And I think the very basic thing we can do is provide food to our elderly and our children. So anyway, those are a couple critical pieces of that farm bill. Now, there is some talk in the Project 2025, which, we don't know if it's really true or not, about removing crop insurance. And the question that I have, if it didn't make it through the House floor, is that the intention of the House majority? I don't know. That is a risk that you will all have to decide if you want to take that or not this fall. Because the Farm Bill didn't make it. Now, I don't really want to blame anything on Senator Klobuchar. She's been pretty awesome for southern Minnesota. And I know she cares deeply about farm policy. And I think everyone in this room knows that. So if we're going to blame it on Senator Klobuchar, I think that's probably a good idea to alert her on that, right? The Farm Bill did not do what it was supposed to do.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Bowman, we're going to stick with you. We're going to talk about everybody's favorite subject, taxes. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 is set to expire at the end of 2025. There are several provisions in there that are very important to small businesses. If Congress does nothing, it will be the largest tax increase in American history. What will be your priorities as Congress works on this major issue?
Thank you. Well, one of the other important issues, of course, the Small Business Association is now out of funding based on the disaster relief. So if you're looking at any of the small businesses that have been hit by hurricanes, they no longer have the funds or the resources to help small businesses in those areas. And the speaker has now said that he is not willing to call back Congress. Now, maybe my research is wrong, and my opponent will tell me otherwise, which I would love to see the Congress come back and help our small businesses. But I absolutely want to make it a priority to make sure that we continue to help our small businesses. That is one of the top priorities. I am a child of the 80s, and I remember growing up actually I'm a child of the 70s, but my more favorite time were the 80s, right? So I remember seeing main streets lined with your local grocery store, your bakery, and retail shops. And I think about the industries that you have here in Mankato. We absolutely need to make sure that stays on track for our economy. So I will do everything I possibly can to make sure that our small businesses continue to thrive and have the resources they need.
Thank you. Mr. Vincent.
Perfect. So, Rachel, you commented that farmers are some of your favorite people, but I am not feeling the love tonight. So the 2017 Jobs and Tax Act is set to expire. If it fully expires, it'll be $4.5 trillion of a tax increase. Unacceptable. At a time when the economy is tough on families, it would be devastating to each and every one of us in this room. It'd be devastating to families, to businesses, you name it. A few months back, we passed a start to reauthorizing the Jobs and Tax Act. We took a look at the R&D tax credits. We took a look at the child tax credits. And it was very bipartisan. I think there was 320-some votes for that bill. So that's the good news, that there's a bipartisan effort underfoot to take the 2017 tax bill and to reauthorize bits and pieces of it. What is more important now than ever is some stability and some normalcy in our economy. And to disrupt what we have right now in regards to letting those tax cuts expire would throw us upside down. We would see an economy that would crumble in months. And so it's important for us to provide that steady hand. It's also important to understand that we can't just tax our way out of the problem. So for instance, there's been a discussion in Congress about the corporate tax rate. If you were to raise it just 1%, it's about a $75 billion increase. $75 billion doesn't even scratch the surface to the $36 trillion of debt that we're in. And so there needs to be a healthy conversation in this country in regards to the tax climate that we have right now, what worked in the 2017 Jobs and Tax Act, how can we continue to leverage the things that worked well, like the child tax deductions, the R&D tax credits, and the different tools that have allowed us to grow as an economy, and make mild adjustments where we need to, but by no means can we let it expire.
Thank you, Mr. Finstead. We'll start this next question with you. This was an audience-submitted question and goes into one that Andy and I had prepared for you, and it's childcare. Now, over the past several years, there has been a growing concern about the lack of availability of childcare in the greater Minnesota, and providers often cite excessive regulation as a barrier to that success for their own business. Across our state, childcare is seen as one of the primary obstacles to developing a strong workforce and creating economic growth. What, if anything, can be done at the federal level to make childcare more affordable and accessible in the First District?
Yeah, great question, and it's something that I hear quite often. I was in Faribault visiting with the chamber and a few other folks there, and some of the folks from Faribault Food said they lost 71 employees last year. 71 employees because of the lack of access to childcare. And so we have to take a look, to make a good, smart, intellectual, educated decision and response. We have to look at how did we get here. First of all, we got here because of the heavy hand and the regulatory climate of government. The state of Minnesota enacted new regulations that we saw a huge exodus of the in-home daycare model. And again, I've heard this over and over and over again of former providers that said when the new regulations came in, they shut their doors. And so we saw this huge need that went unmet. From the federal government's perspective, there is tools that we have in the Farm Bill, the USDA Rural Development Funds that have been partners with local communities to fund new innovative approaches. We're starting to see a pod model come about where we have maybe a community that has some facilities that are shuttered, no longer in use, old schools, old hospitals, old community centers that are converted over to house multiple daycare providers under one roof so there can be shared costs, heating, cooling, kitchen equipment, and whatnot. We've seen strong success there. USDA Rural Development has been a partner with local communities on that. That's one area where we can be of big help.
Thank you. And you, Ms. Bowen?
Yeah, I agree. I'm pretty concerned about some of the overregulation on childcare, but I'll tell you, I was, as an assistant county attorney, one of the things that I had to do was I had to review if there were childcare cases where daycare centers or daycare providers weren't following some of those regulations and some of the consequences that might happen as a result of that. And it's pretty hard to tell parents when, a plastic bag was accidentally left near the crib, right? And resulted in something pretty terrible. So I get it. We have to have a fair balance, right? And I actually was one of these people in the workforce where we couldn't make it work for me to be working full time because by the time that I paid childcare, I almost made nothing. And I hear that over and over and over. I know what that feels like. So this is actually a pretty near and dear issue to me. I think there are two things I'd like to see from the federal government. One would be to restore and improve the child tax credit. And secondly, I agree with my opponent on the pod-like daycare. I know it comes out of New Ulm. It's called the Westridge Center. Senator Tina Smith has been out there and has promoted that. And, it's a really innovative idea, and I love to see innovation. I don't think the federal government has to get involved in every little thing, but if there's ways that we can help move it along with funding for the building, for example, like in this particular case in New Ulm, it was a giant building that they put into 4 different sections. So 4 different providers could be they could be like their in-home daycare. Now, it wasn't a center. They were 4 individual places. The building needed quite a bit of remodeling. So the local economic development group actually raised the funds, it was over $1 million that they needed to renovate the building. And so if that's a place where the federal government needs to help or to contribute in order to build our communities, I think, that is great. So I do think, but those 2 areas, the child tax credit, and then, if there are small localized projects that we can continue to invest in our communities.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to stick with you, Ms. Bowman. We're going to talk about something we've already heard about this evening, and that's immigration. Immigration is a complex issue, but it is a key component to addressing our workforce needs. In fact, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has been a vocal supporter of immigration reform for years, citing America's woefully inadequate immigration system is directly contributing to the worker shortage crisis and hindering American business operations. Do you support immigration reform that will allow businesses to meet their critical workforce needs in a timely manner? Ms. Bowman.
Yes, I absolutely support immigration reform. I believe that we do need it. It is a vital part of our economy. I do believe that our country was born and on the backs of immigrants. And I have had the opportunity to go out to a lot of communities to meet with a lot of hardworking folks where they have immigrated from all over to be here. I mean, these folks are outstanding. But I also feel like there is this feeling of like, well, we kind of want you here, but we kind of don't. And they can feel that. And I think that we need to do a better job at making sure that we have our communities set up too. Like housing, for example, we need to make sure that there's adequate housing in these communities if we're bringing people in to work in our economy. Now, there was a bipartisan immigration bill. I believe that should have passed. I believe we should have continued down that road, and we didn't, because my understanding is that there was a decision by President Trump, former President Trump, to kill it, to make it a political issue. And that is not fair to the people of this country who are working, and it is not fair to the employers that need those workers in our economy.
Mr. Vincent.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So workforce shortages, it's something that we hear day in, day out. And it's really to the point now where it's crippling us in our economy. And we have to remember our roots. We are a country that's built on immigrants. And we also have become so complex and so convoluted with our process right now, I don't think anyone in this room could explain it to your friends or neighbors what it takes to become a citizen of this country. And so we can do better than that. We can do better than that. We've seen 2 very politicized issues in the last 10 years. One was we're going to build a wall and stop the border chaos. And then we've seen we're not going to have a wall at all, and we're not going to know who's coming in or out. There needs to be a compromise with adults in the room that says, how about the wall with the door that gets open, and that hallway is immigration? You and I should understand what it takes to become a citizen. It should be done in a timely manner. It should be affordable, and it should meet the critical needs of our workforce. We have national security issues. We have shortages. We have 60,000 healthcare shortages in Minnesota alone. We have 5,000 engineers that are needed in this state that will be left job opens. And so there's critical needs here, and our immigration process needs to meet the needs of our workforce. You look at right now the visa process, the H-2B, the worker visa, the TN visa process, it's completely broke. We have folks in the ag industry that utilize the TN visa process that have just a year and a half ago, we're getting about 75% of the folks that they were interviewing and offering jobs to be allowed to come in on those visas. And now we are seeing zero. Some companies are getting turned down 100% of the time on the TN visa requests. And so it's unsustainable. We have to fix what's broke. It's become too complex. We need to simplify this. And I think this is one of those areas where Republicans and Democrats alike, I think it's the 80% of the adults in the room, the extremes on the fringes can scream from the sides of the room, but 80% of us in this country, I think, could figure this out by 9 o'clock tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. And let's continue on the theme of workforce, Mr. Finstead. Employers are continuing to struggle to hire employees to fill some of the most essential positions, and institutions like South Central College are critical to ensuring our region has a pipeline of highly skilled workers. So what will your priorities be to ensure our region has an abundant and qualified workforce, not only now, but also in the future?
Yeah, great question. I think it starts, number one, with making sure that we get back into our high schools and our elementary schools to introduce them to the great opportunities that exist right here in our backyard. We have gotten complacent with selling the opportunities to our youth. On top of that, we also have to hold up those that are doing it well in higher ed, like Dr. Parker, meeting the speed of business, providing classrooms that represent exactly what you'll see across the street if you get that job right after graduation. The employer loves it because they're skilled workers that are ready to go on day one. The student loves it because it's a great economic opportunity from day one. And it's about awareness and making sure people know that these opportunities exist. We have awesome education facilities, universities, two-year schools in southern Minnesota that have met the need in various capacities. And so you look at Riverland, they're offering a critical need right now, truck drivers, CDLs. They have a CDL course right there on campus where you're able to get your CDL, you're able to train. Folks like Quick Trip and others that have such a desperate need for truck drivers have donated trucks. And so we're seeing the private sector pair strongly with our public institutions, and what we're seeing is a more responsive product, a more responsive degree, certificate, diploma, whatever it may be that workforce need presents, and our schools are responding to that. So we need to uphold that, tell that story, support that where we can, and make sure that there's more tools for students and families to invest in things like that. So, you know, for instance, the 529 traditional funds that families have used to set money aside for college, the way it was set up was really just for four-year institutions. I've introduced a bill in a bipartisan manner to open up 529s to pay for things like tools if you're gonna go become a diesel mechanic, or whatever it may be that is a higher education or a higher certificate program that allows you to work your way into the workforce. So we have to be innovative and we have to think to the future.
Thank you. Ms. Bowman, please.
Yeah, so I think recruiting people to your community is multifaceted. I think people are looking for communities that have, you know, good child care, they have affordable housing, they have good schools. Those are all part of the people's decision to move to a community. And that's what's attractive to a workforce. So I think to the extent that we have those as an option to many of our local communities, the workforce will come. And I very much support investing and funding in each one of those things. And healthcare too. I mean, if you don't have healthcare available in your community, it's very difficult to recruit and to gain more people to come to your community. And that is just the fact. I mean, and the other piece that I have really learned about is tourism. So tourism in southern Minnesota is really important because it brings in for the first time so many people who are never seen southern Minnesota. They look at southern Minnesota for the first time. They're interested. It becomes a way to get people into the community more. But really, the top things are, you know, healthcare, housing, childcare, and jobs. So I had an opportunity to really look at the Mankato Growth website, you know, looking at doing this event tonight and the South Central College. and really loved the partnerships that are going on in Mankato. I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing such a success here in this community, is because you are working together to create so many of these aspects to recruit your workforce and train your workforce, which is so important. And so I guess I think that is a great model for us in southern Minnesota.
Thank you. And if folks are wondering, greatermankato.com is our website. So, so I do want to sneak in one more audience question before we get to our final question, talking about energy and the environment. We're in an energy transition in our economy right now. But this question from an audience member: how can we make energy costs more affordable for families? Ms. Bowman, I'll start with you.
I really truly believe climate change matters, and it's here. And I hear that a lot from our farmers too. And I have had the opportunity to visit with a lot of places around southern Minnesota, but one of them is I did get to tour an ethanol plant. And I realized that I don't have their endorsement like my opponent does, which I'm sure he'll all remind you of. But I really had an amazing experience. And I want to talk about the fact that we are doing some really innovative things in southern Minnesota, and I'm very proud of the work that we are doing to become less energy dependent on coal and oil. I do not believe that we should be drilling for more of those natural resources. I believe we should be continuing to expand and develop our other renewable sources of energy so that we are less dependent on our natural resources. Because if we just drill away, eventually those natural resources are going to run out. Then what? So we absolutely need to continue down the path of making sure that we have plenty of renewable energy sources. One of the things about this infrastructure bill was expanding our electric grid. And that, to me, was such an important feature because it really allows what we've already developed for solar and wind to tap into that so that we can use that on a much greater scale. And that, to me, is where we are going for the future.
Thank you. Mr. Finstead.
So we need to create more energy policy that is all of the above approach. When we as government pick winners and losers with our energy sources, quite frankly, we as the taxpayer become the loser. So you talk about the new transmission for the renewables, the wind and the solar. I just met with the Community Municipality Association that deals with 12 rural communities in southern Minnesota, that they work together to purchase power, deliver power, and provide, God willing, affordable power to our local communities. And they told me that they'll need to add another 4,000 miles of transmission capacity to get to the requirements that Rachel had talked about. I asked them how they're going to do that, and they said, well, no one will be able to afford the rates that we're going to have to charge to do that. And so we have to be wise in our investments. We have to be smart about how we take care of our natural resources, but we also have to be honest. So if we go down this road of an electric vehicle economy, what is that going to do to you and I? Where do we get the minerals to provide the resources to make those electric vehicles? The lithium, the copper, the nickel. Just because it doesn't happen in our backyard, we feel like it's going to be done environmentally safe with, above board child labor standards, and we'll all feel good at night because it's not happening here in our country, but we're all driving electric vehicles. Electric vehicles will work for the people that it will work for, but to be mandated upon everybody is insane. I've asked Ford multiple times, do you produce a F-350 that can pull 350 bushels of corn in my wagon? And they said no. And I said, are you working on it? And they said, well, we're looking into it. And I said, do you think you'll get there? And they said, we don't know if we'll be able to have the pulling torque and the battery life for you to be able to do that. So there'll need to be other options. It can be one option, but it can't be the option. But affordability and the ratepayer has to be at the forefront when we have these conversations. Because this can all sound good in theory and in political rhetoric, but at the end of the day, someone will have to pay for it. And if it's you and I that are already struggling in this economy, it will bankrupt us. So we have to be wise with our investments when it comes to the energy conversation in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Finstead. Now I have one last question for you both, so we can breathe a little bit easy. So as we close out, we want to give you each a chance to make your case to voters in one final statement. Mr. Finstead, we'll start with you. Why should voters vote for you to represent them in Congress?
So thank you. Thank you for moderating tonight. Rachel, thank you. Appreciate all of you being here. My simple ask is this, is that, I've made it pretty clear to anybody I ever talk to that my goal is heaven, not Congress. But I believe that we each have a responsibility to do whatever we can to leave our backyard better for the next generation. As a father of 7, I know that we are not doing our best. I will continue to work hard day in, day out, try to be the adult in the room that's willing to work with anybody and everybody that has a good idea to put our country first and to put us forward to truly make positive changes that will leave our backyard better. It's been an honor of a lifetime to serve each and every one of you in Congress the last 2.5 years. I am very humbled to know that I get to sit in your seat in Congress. There's a lot of serious issues that our country faces right now, and we need a balanced, serious leader to continue to focus on the things that matter to families all across southern Minnesota. I'll continue to work hard, I'll continue to listen more than I talk, and I'll continue to show up. So I appreciate the honor to serve you. I appreciate you all being here tonight, and I would very humbly ask for your vote in November.
Thank you. Ms. Bowman?
We have been on a path for the last 2 years, lockstep with Trump. I'd like an opportunity to change that path. We look at some of the votes that have happened over the last 2 years from our representative, and I disagree with most of them. I think that we have an opportunity to really go back to Congress and do some really good work. I think about what we could do with the Farm Bill. I think about what we could do to make childcare affordable and accessible. I think about health care being affordable and accessible. And I think about where do we want to see our country go? I know that we are facing some serious questions, and it is going to take a lot of hard work and a lot of tough conversations. I don't think any one of these issues are issues or problems that we can have just in a 5-minute conversation. I know we are struggling. And I know that we're struggling and even sometimes talking to one another in our communities about some of these issues. I want to be the person that shows up for you, for your community, to actually get the work done, to have those tough conversations, and be honest with you, and give you the bad news, even if it's the bad news, so you know where we stand, so you know where I stand. I think that that is one of the most important parts of serving a community. And so it would be a tremendous honor to serve in this community. And I hope you will consider early voting, or you'll vote on November 5th for me. Thank you so much.
Please join me in thanking our candidates for being here this evening. Thank you to Maddie Paul with KEYC for your partnership this evening. Thank you to Dr. Parker and South Central College for hosting us this evening. Thank you to all of you for attending tonight. This forum has been recorded and will be available online along with candidate biographies at greatermankatoelections.com. Thank you, good night, and don't forget to vote. Take a picture. That's okay. We're gonna have Jell-O.